Hello everyone, welcome back to CloudOps Craft. Today we are going to discuss our part 3 interview questions with respect to Docker, which is Docker file and build process. I have already posted part 1 and part 2 of Docker interview questions. If you didn't watch it, I'll just provide playlist link in the description. So you just click it and watch it. So before going part 3, you will be good with part 1 and part 2. Okay, let's start. And I will update my repo link also where I have these entry questions, as well as all my videos will be available as a medium article also. Okay, so you are watching video after some time, if you want to revise, you no need to watch it again. Okay, instead of that, you can go to my medium and you can find that article, article of that video. Okay, so you can read from there for revision. Okay, so let's dive. Okay, first question. Okay, like in part 3 we are going to discuss entry questions regarding docker file and build process. Okay, first question is purpose of a docker file. They will ask you to explain purpose of a docker file. Here interview context will be, interviewer wants to see whether you treat container build as reproducible versioned artifacts, not just iron commands and commit. They want to know you understood intent, repeatable image builds, CI friendly and machine readable configuration. So let me explain this. Actually, Docker file is a small text file that declares the steps to build a Docker image. It's a declarative recipe that captures base image. Okay, we will with the help of from key instruction. Okay, we will pull the base image. Okay, let me zoom this. Okay, so base image we will fetch it from key instruction, and actions to install dependencies. For that we will use run. Okay, oh, for app files are copied with the help of copy and add. Okay, what working directory to use? With the help of work dir we will define that. Okay, and default command and arguments that we will define at entry point entry point and cmd. Okay, we can use entry point and cmd. And metadata, for metadata we can use labels. Okay, so I am side by side I am posting docker videos also, explaining how docker works. Okay, docker series also in weekdays I'll post. Okay, docker interview questions I'll post only on weekend. Okay, if you want to learn docker, you can check my channel. Even I'll provide a playlist link in the description, so you can learn docker from cloud abstract. Okay, so let's start. Because it's a code, it is versioned with your repository, enabling reproducible builds in CI. The Dockerfile plus build context produces the exact layers and the resulting image digest. In practice, teams store Dockerfile with source, use it in CI pipelines to build immutable images and publish them to registries. How to answer this question in interview? You can answer like a Docker is a canonical version controlled for building an image. It codifies the steps to create a reproducible artifact, so CI can build the exact same image every time. I always keep my Docker file in source control, optimize layer order for catchy, and let CI produce the final push to the pushed image to the registry. Okay, and the second question is, what is a difference between cmd and entry point? This is widely asked entry question. Okay, if they ask this to you, the entry context will be, they are checking whether you know the runtime semantics, default arguments versus forced executable, and how command overriding works. Okay, so let me explain this first cmd. Okay, let's start with entry point. Okay, so entry point, actually it sets the executable that will always run the image main process. If you are using entry point to run a command, it will run in the image main process. Okay, If you are using cmd to run any command, it provides default arguments for that executable. Okay, if there is no, if entry point is absent, because you can run the command with the help of cmd also, cmd can act as the default command to run. If there is no other commands are provided, it use cmd command to run. Whenever your container starts, it will run. For example, you are working on like what I can say, web project. Okay, you are building that web app with Django. Okay, if you want to run Django application, the command is python manage.py run server. Okay, this you can pause as a command also. Okay, so the thing is here, uh, execute like a exec a form which is recommended one. Okay, entry point. Okay, entry point is like it will, like as we discussed, it will run as a main image process. Okay, so while coming to cmd, it is a shell form. Okay, it runs via bin bash. Okay, bin sh -c, which wraps in a shell. Okay, it affects signal handling, but while coming to entry point, signal passes correctly. No shell, so signal passes correctly. If you are using entry point, entry point uses exec form. Okay, so which is no shell and signal passes correctly. But here we will use a shell. Okay, for example, if you are running any command in cmd, it runs via bin sh -c. Okay, which wraps in a shell. It affects signal handling. Okay, behavior is if both entry point and cmd are present, docker calls entry point with the cmd. Okay, entry point with cmd as its arguments. Okay, for example, if you want to run any app with some port, then you can use entry point as entry point. For example, if it is python application, consider you are running flask application, then your main file is app.py. So you can use this in entry point. While coming to cmd, you can pass your port as an argument. So your app will run on 80 point. How it finally executes in docker container? Python app.py port 8080. Okay, so how to answer an interview? Entry point is the image fixed executable. Command is the default arguments or default command if entry point is missing. A common pattern is entry point for the binary and cmd for defaults. So users can overwrite arguments on docker run without replacing the executable. Okay, so third question is, what happens if both are defined? It is a continuity of the same question. What happens if both cmd and entry points are defined? Here entry context will be, interviewers want an example showing your understand how docker compose them and how to override behavior. Okay, so this is a continuity question you will definitely get. Okay, so how you can answer for this? First I will explain. When both are defined, docker runs the entry point as the executable and appends cmd as a default arguments. If the user provides arguments on docker run image and arguments, for example, if user provides docker run image, okay, some image name and argument, okay, argument 1, those arguments replace cmd, not the entry point. Remember this. To completely replace entry point, you must use docker run, okay, entry point. You have to use this keyword entry point and you have to provide other entry point, so only you can overwrite or replace it. Okay, so the thing is, how to answer in an interview? Docker will execute entry point and passes cmd as default arguments. If user supplies new arguments during docker run, they replace the cmd arguments to override the entry point itself, you see. Okay, with the help of -entry point. Okay, so the next question is, why we have to use work dir instead of cd. Okay, have you people like while you are using work dir, have you thought why we are not using cd and why we are using work dir? If you don't know, like in this question you will understand it. Okay, here interview context will be interviewers are checking whether you know docker file best practices and how instruction scope works across its layers. Okay, let me explain. Okay, work dir, if I am using work dir, okay, and I am setting app, okay, app as my working directory, what it will do if I use work dir slash app, it will make app as a working directory, right? So all subsequent docker file instructions like run, cmd, entry point, copy, or relative paths, okay, all will be executed under this app folder. It also becomes metadata stored in the image. Doing run, okay, for example I am using run, okay, to run cd, run cd slash app, okay, and I'll do something. Okay, it only affects single run instruction. The next instruction has a fresh shell and won't inherit this cd, which means your subsequent commands will not run on app folder. But if you are using workdir, subsequent commands also will run under workdir. So the workdir makes Dockerfile readable and avoids changing cd in every run. If you are not using workdir and if you are using cd, then every command, in every run command you have to provide cd. Okay, which affects readability, right? So we can avoid changing changing cd in every run if you are using workdir. So how to answer an interview? Workdir sets the working directory for subsequent instructions and it is persisted in the image metadata. Using it makes the docker file cleaner and avoids brittle, okay, run cd, okay, and change that only affect a single run layer. Okay, so next question. Next question is, what does from scratch mean? Yeah, have you tried using from scratch? Mostly you will use from Ubuntu or from Python or from Nginx. Yeah, have you tried using from scratch anytime? So if they ask this question to you, the entry context will be they want to know if you can build minimal images and understand when a base OS is unnecessary. Example, static binaries. Let me explain this. If you are using from scratch, okay, in while writing a docker file, if you are using a from scratch, means start from an empty file system. It's used when your final image contains only a single statically linked binary or necessary artifacts, no base OS layers. Okay, typical use cases, for example, if you are using Go language static binaries, for example, C Go underscore enabled equal to 0, it is copied from scratch only. Distros are minimal images where you want the absolute smallest runtime, because scratch provides nothing. Okay, you must ensure your binary has everything it needs, libraries, certificates if required, or you copy minimal dependencies. So how you can answer an interview? From scratch starts from an empty file system and it is used to produce ultra small images for statically linked binaries. We use it when we need minimal attack surface and fast pulls. The trade off is we must ensure all runtime dependencies are bundled into the binary. Okay, so the next question is, what is build context? Okay, if they ask this question, the entry context will be interviewers look for awareness of how large context affect build performance and what docker ignore does. Okay, so here you need to know about docker ignore file also. Okay, let me explain. Build context is the set of files the docker client packages. as a tar stream and sends to the Docker D during Docker build. The Docker D uses the context to evaluate copy, add steps, okay, and to compute cache keys. If the context is large, for example, it contains node modules or .git build artifacts, builds get slow because the client must send everything to the Docker D. You reduce context size, okay, with the help of Docker ignore. It will work like a git ignore, dot git ignore. Okay, so where we will use .git ignore if you are working with version control system. Okay, if you want some files should not push, okay, you should not push some files into git repository, then what you will do, you will add that file in git ignore, right? The same thing only Docker ignore also do. Okay, and it only copying the required files. Okay, unnecessary files like node modules and all, you can add it in Docker ignore. Okay, also note, build context may be local directories or URLs depending on the builder. Okay, build kit supports different remote context. Okay, if you want to learn build kit, I'll in upcoming days I will make video on build kit also in my Docker series, so you can watch from there. So how you can answer in an interview? Build context is the folder and files the Docker client sends to Docker D for building. Large context slow builds, so I always use Docker ignore to exclude unnecessary files like node modules, logs, or .git. Okay, to keep the context small and catchy effective. Okay, next question: what happens internally during Docker build? Okay, so here entry context will be, they want you to explain layer creation, cache checks, temporary containers for run and final image assembly, not just a high level summary. Okay, so let me explain high level flow. Okay, client packages the build context and sends it to Docker D. Docker file is paste and each instruction is processed in order. For each instruction, Docker checks the build cache for a matching layer, instruction plus relevant context. If cache it will reuse the layer. Okay. Otherwise, if cache misses, it executes this step. For example, for a run, okay, Docker starts a temporary container. Okay, whenever you execute run command, Docker starts the temporary container, it runs the command inside it, then commits the file system changes as a new layer. Okay, for if you are using copy and add in Dockerfile, what it will do, it copy files from context into the new layer. If you are using from it, what it do in Dockerfile, it marks the base image and continues. Okay, after all instructions, Docker writes the image manifest and stores the image locally with an image ID and digest. Okay, so modern builds uses buildkit, which improves caching, does parallelism, supports mount-based caches, secrets, and remote cache export and import. But the conceptual layer per instruction model remains useful to reason about cache invalidation. Okay, so the thing is, for example, I am writing a Docker file. Okay, I am using from to run to copy to run again. Okay, so what it will do, it will check cache, right? It will check cache. Okay, run and copy. Okay, while you are executing, it will try to reuse, or it will create layer. Final image will be image manifest, it will store image. Okay, so how do you answer in an interview? Let me explain. So how you can answer is, Docker build sends the build context to the Docker team. It presses the Docker file and processes each instruction. Docker checks the cache for each step. On a cache miss, it executes this step. Run executes in temporary container and the result is committed as a new layer. At the end, it assembles the image manifest and stores the image locally. Modern build kit optimizes this with parallelism and advanced caching. Okay. So the next question is, what is a dot Docker ignore and why it is important? So this is also one of the follow-up question, you may get it. Okay, let me explain. Okay, here interview context will be, Here entry context will be they expect you to know about performance and security impacts of build context. Missing Docker ignore is a common performance bug. Okay, so let me explain. Docker ignore is just a text file. Okay, like git ignore in the build context root that specifies files and directories to exclude from the build context. It prevents sending unnecessary files like node modules, git logs, and IDE files to the Docker. Okay, what it will do if you are not sending these files into dockerd, then what it will do is it will reduce build upload time, so your build will be very fast. And catchy invalidation frequently, risk of adding sensitive files to images by accident, you can avoid all these things, it will reduce all these things. Okay, so how you can write docker ignore is just a test file. Okay, just create dot docker ignore and just add node modules folder .git, .env, okay, .log files, dist, all these things. This keep context minimal and speeds CI builds. Okay, so how to answer an interview? Dot Docker ignore excludes unnecessary files from the build context, improving build speed and catchy efficiency, and reducing the chance of accidentally adding secrets or local artifacts into the image. I always include .git node modules and .env entries, like that you can answer. Okay, so the next question is how to reduce image size. Okay, if you don't know that, if you don't know about multi-stage docker file, then again I suggest you to follow with my docker series, so you will know that. Okay, so in here entry context will be, they will test practical skills like performance, security, and deploy time trade-offs. Okay, detailed, let me explain this in detail. Okay, common build stages. Okay, common technique use that you need to know. First is multi-stage builds. Okay, build plus runtime separation. Copy only artifacts needed for runtime. Next is minimal base image. Okay, use Alpine, Distolus, or Scratch when possible. Okay, whenever possible. Next is remove package caches. Remove package catchy. Okay, example apt get clean and the rmrf, for example if you are running with any path in the same run. Okay, don't use multiple run commands. Okay, use one single run and try to try to add all your run commands. Okay, that only my next technique, combine run commands. Okay, it reduces the number of intermediate layers. For example, right, in docker file, okay, each line you write will create a separate layer. If you are writing 10 instructions, 10 lines, it will create 10 layers. Okay, so I suggest you to reduce the layers by using a single run command, and you can run all possible run commands there. Okay, so next is avoid adding dev dependencies. Avoid adding dev dependencies. Okay, into final image. Okay, install dev dependencies in builder stage itself. Okay, and one more thing is use use docker ignore to avoid copying unneeded files. Next, do strip binaries to remove docs and tests not required at runtime. And even you can use copy -, from equal to builder. Okay, to bring only artifacts. Okay, so how to answer an interview? I minimize images using multi-stage builds, small base image, removing package caches in the same run command, and copying only runtime artifacts into the final image. This reduces pull time, attack surface, and storage cost. Okay, this is how we have to explain in interviews. Okay, next, difference between ARG and ENV. Here the interview context will be they want to confirm the build time versus runtime scope and security implications. Okay, let me explain this. ARG and ENV. Okay, it's a build time variable, which means we will use this only for whenever you do docker build command. Okay, this is image metadata. Okay, so the thing is ARG visible only during build. Okay, can have default values in Dockerfile. For example, you can write ARG version equal to 1.0 like that and be overwritten by docker build command. Okay, like a version 2 like 1.2 while you are doing docker build. Okay, how you can call, for example, if you are using this in a docker file while you are building, you can use docker build hyphen build hyphen arg version equal to 1.2. So where you can use is, for example, even in Ubuntu, for example, you can use from arg version like that. If you are using Ubuntu, okay, here you can provide default version as 22 if you are not providing any version. If you can still override this to 24 while you are building, okay, with the help of docker build. Okay, so I explained detailedly in my docker series, so you can watch this to understand in depth. Okay, so mostly arg values are not available at container runtime unless you explicitly use env on them. Okay, so arg is just like a build time variable, which means while you are doing docker build, if you want to overwrite any value, that you can do with the help of build argument. Okay, like this. Okay, env is a image metadata. While coming to env is the image metadata. It preserved into image and available at runtime as environmental variable. Env persists in the image history. Your security note will be arg values can still appear in the image history. Okay, so don't use them for secrets. Okay, so if you want, for example, by default you want to build with Ubuntu 22, but if you need in some time, you can override this to Ubuntu 24 also. Then you can do this with arg. Okay, arg version 22, and you can call this okay from okay Ubuntu arg version like that you can call. Okay, but don't use them for secrets, because it will be available like it will be still appear in image history. Okay, build kit offers secret mounts to pass secrets during build without baking them into layers. Okay, so actually if you know build kit, it will be better. Okay, so because in real time we mostly use build kit. Okay, so how to answer an interview? arg is for build time only, and it's not available in the running container. env sets the environmental variables baked into the image and visible at runtime. Use arg for build time configuration and env for runtime defaults, and never break secrets into either. Okay, don't use secrets in both arg and env. Okay, next is, what is multi-stage build? Here interview context will be they test whether you can create small runtime images while still compiling building large artifacts in the same docker file. Here let me explain. Like a multi-stage build uses multiple from statements in one docker file. You can perform heavy build steps in an explicit builder stage and then copy only the final artifacts into the minimal final stage. This keeps the final image small and removes build time dependencies, compilers, dev tools. Okay, so if you want to do hands on with this, then again please follow my Docker series so you can get it. Okay, but this is how it works. Okay, so in short, okay, how to answer an interview. You can answer like a multi-stage builds let you compile or build inside a heavier builder image and then copy the minimal runtime artifacts into a tiny final image, which results in smaller, more secure production images. Next is how to reuse build cache effectively. If they ask this question, the entry context will be they want you to optimize CI builds and minimize wasted compute and network. Okay, so here we have to follow some strategies for this. Okay, let me explain that key strategies that you can follow in even in real time if you are working for a company. First is layer ordering. Put stable steps first. Okay, install OS dependencies and volatile steps later. Okay, next is isolate dependencies. Okay, copy only dependency files, example package.json, recommends.txt, and run package install before copying the full source. This keeps dependency layer cached when only source images when source changes. Third is again Docker ignore to avoid unnecessary cache invalidation. Next is remove cache. Remove cache with the help of hyphen cache hyphen from. What this will do, it will tell the builder to use an image in the registry as a cache source. Okay, useful in CI. Next is build kit cache mounts. Okay, it uses run hyphen mount equal to type equal to cache. Okay, to cache package manager caches across us builds. Okay, and even you can use build x under CI caching. Okay, push and pull build cache between CI runs. Okay, so how to answer? Like I maximize cache reuse by ordering Dockerfile steps so stable instructions are yearly, copying dependency manifests separately. Using .docker ignore and leveraging remote cache hyphen cache hyphen from or build kit cache mounts in CI to persist cache across us builds. Okay, so the next is why copy files after installing dependencies. This is a practical test. Okay, uh, can you reason about cache invalidation and make the build fast? Okay, entry context will be so here let me explain. Because Docker cache keys are tied to instruction order and inputs, copying all resource files yearly, okay, example copy all those things will invalidate later layers when any resources file changes. By copying only dependency manifests like package.json or requirements.txt and running package installation before copying the rest of the source, you ensure the expensive dependency install layer stays cached until dependencies usually change. So how to answer an interview? We copy dependency manifest and run the install step before copying the full source so that npm and pip installs remain cached across as code changes. This makes rebuild faster and reduces CI time. Okay. Next is common mistakes in Docker files. Okay, here interview context will be they want to see your practical experience and ability to avoid spot pitfalls in production images. Okay, so how you can explain is common mistakes and how to fix them. Okay, no Docker ignore. Okay, if there is no Docker ignore, huge context and slow builds, many small run files. Okay, many layers like IR overhead. Okay, so you fixes combine logically related commands into one. Next is leaving package caches, like for example if you are using varlib apt list in image, fix will be clean within the same run. Okay, next is installing dev test dependencies in final image. How to fix this? Use multi-stage builds and baking secrets into Docker file or ARG. How you can fix this? You can use build time secrets or runtime secret stores. How like next is using add instead of copy when not needed. Okay, add, what it will do, it auto extracts, store and supports URLs. Fix is prefer copy whenever it's needed. Okay, using shell form for entry point. Actually, it affects signals and PID one behavior. How you can fix? You can use exec form, okay, instead of shell form in the entry point. Next mistakes is using latest in from for production, which is non-repeatable builds. Okay, fixes, you can pin the version like from Ubuntu 22, from Ubuntu 20, from Ubuntu 18, like that. Okay, not setting user. Next issue mistake is not setting user. Containers run as a root by default. Okay, fix is add a non-root user in final image. Next is large base images without need, which is biloaded images. Fixes, choose minimal base or distro-less. Forgetting work dir, it leads to brittle run commands. Okay, relying on Docker commit for reproducibility. How you can fix? With the help of using Docker builds. So how you can answer? Okay, common mistakes include missing Docker ignore many small run commands, leaving caches or dev dependencies in the final image, and baking secrets into the image. I follow best practices. Use minimal stage builds, pin base image, use Docker ignore, combine commands where logical, and run as a non-root user. Okay, so next is real scenario, app fails due to entry point, how to debug. Okay, here entry context will be, they will test troubleshooting. Do you have logical method, inspect, replicate, override. Okay, and no Docker behavior. Okay, for entry point scripts and executable forms. How you can explain this? Let me explain this. Semantic debug steps. First is read the error. Okay, if the container starts then exits, run docker ps-a and docker logs to capture standard errors. Okay, next is inspect the image container metadata. Use docker inspect and container id, it will show entry point and cmd fields. Verify what docker will execute. Check executable existence and permission. Entry point may point to a script that's missing or not executable. Inspect the image file system. Okay, so you can do that with the help of docker and okay, let me write that command. So you can do that with the help of docker run rm entry point ls image tag -l path to entry point .sh. Okay, and you can run container interactively overriding entry point also. How you can do that? Docker run rm like -it entry point bin /sh. Okay, and image tag. Okay, then inspect files, run command manually and test environmental variables. Check a script shebang and exec usage. Okay, if entry point is a shell script, ensure it has like a bin /sh or bash. Okay, that you execute the final process so signals get forwarded. Or check switch to execute json from if you are using shell form. Execute forms avoids an additional shell layer and improves signal handling. Okay, so how you can how to answer in interviews? I first check docker logs for immediate errors and docker inspect to confirm the entry point and cmd. Then I will run the image interactively overriding the entry point to poke inside, verify the entry script exits and it's executable, and run the commanded executable manually. Often fixes, okay, or adding exec in vapor script, switching to the exec form entry point, or correcting file paths and permissions. So I also check exit codes. If it is 127 means not found. If exit code is 126, which is related to permission issue. Okay, which points directly to the issue. Okay, so this is how we have to answer. Okay, I hope you like this breakdown. Okay, if you have any questions or doubts or queries, you can let me know on the comment section. Okay, so I'll reply. Okay, if you like this breakdown, subscribe to Cloud Ops Craft. We will simplify cloud and DevOps concepts every week. Thank you.